All right, so you're interested in functionalism in anthropology, particularly its origins back in 20th century England. Well, get this. We're diving deep into this super influential school of thought, and we're not just sticking with your typical English texts. No, we're going straight to the source with a scholarly paper titled, get this, Antropologia Social Inglesa, La Teoría Funcionalista.
Sounds intense.
It is a bit, but don't worry. We'll be your translators, your guides through all the academic jargon. Think of it as a cultural exchange.
I like that, unpacking insights from the Spanish text and making them relatable even if you don't speak a lick of Spanish.
Exactly. Now, this paper, it really zones in on British social anthropology in the 1920s, you know, the heart of the functionalist movement. But to really get these guys, we need to get the world they lived in.
Oh, absolutely. Context is key.
Right.
Yeah. Picture this. It's the late 19th, early 20th century. British Empire. It's at its peak.
Talk about a power move.
Right. They're managing this massive, crazy, diverse empire. And, well, it's a lot, not to mention expensive.
Yeah, running an empire can't be cheap, so they needed a more, say, cost-effective way to keep things in check.
Exactly. That's where indirect rule comes in. It's all about governing through existing local structures. So instead of just like completely steamrolling in with British systems, they tried working with, or at least appearing to work with, traditional leaders.
So less about forcing their ways and more about strategically navigating the systems already in place. Clever, but I can see how that would take some serious understanding of those local cultures.
Precisely. And that's where anthropologists come in. They became essential, really, for supplying the empire with, intel on the societies they aim to rule.
So anthropology gets a boost from the empire's thirst for practical knowledge, but, and it's a big but, it's happening against this whole backdrop of colonialism. It's fascinating and a little, well, complicated.
It's a nuanced history for sure, and I think what's super crucial to wrap our heads around is how this context, this whole relationship between anthropology and colonialism, it really shaped how these scholars viewed and interpreted other cultures.
Here we've got this backdrop of colonialism, anthropology finding its place, and boom, two major figures pop up, Bronislaw Malinowski and A. Radcliffe Brown. These guys are like the poster boys for functionalism, right?
Yeah, you could say that. They both saw societies as these complex systems, but they had their own ways of, cracking the code. Imagine two detectives, same crime scene, totally different approaches.
I like that. A tale of two anthropologists. And honestly, the whole anthropologist as detective thing, that's pretty cool.
Right.
So let's start with Malinowski. He's the one who was all about get out there and live it. Field work, right?
Oh, absolutely. Malinowski, he was all about total immersion in the culture you're studying. No armchair anthropology for that guy.
Hands-on learning, I like it.
He walked the walk, and listen to this, he spent 4 years living in the Trobriand Islands.
The Trobriand Islands, that's off the coast of New Guinea, right?
You got it. Meticulously documenting the islanders' way of life.
4 years is a long time. I'm guessing that kind of deep dive led to some pretty big aha moments.
Oh, for sure. That's where he developed his concept of needs. Basically, he argued that all humans, we've got these basic needs. Food, shelter, got to keep the species going.
The essentials.
Exactly. And he said that cultures, they develop all these institutions, these practices, just to meet those needs. But then he takes it a step further with derived needs. These are needs that pop up because of the specific, circumstances of living in that particular society.
Okay, so not just the universal needs, but the ones that are specific to that culture. Give me an example. How would that work?
Okay, so take the need for food.
Yeah.
Right, that's a basic one. That need, it leads to the development of agriculture. It makes sense, right? But then, because you've got agriculture, you start to see these social structures popping up around land ownership, inheritance, even religious ceremonies tied to the harvest.
Because now who controls the food is a big deal.
Exactly. So those are your derived needs, things that branch out from that initial need for, well, not starving.
It's like a domino effect.
Right.
One need leads to a solution, which leads to new needs, and cultures just constantly adapt. It's kind of beautiful when you think about it.
It is.
Okay, but how does this all tie back to functionalism?
Right. So for Malinowski, all these institutions, these systems that evolve, it's all about keeping things balanced. He called it maintaining social equilibrium. Basically, that sense of order that keeps a society from going haywire.
So it's all about keeping the machine running smoothly, making sure all the parts work together. And speaking of keeping things running smoothly, let's talk about Malinowski's, I guess you could say, counterpart, Radcliffe Brown. He had a bit of a different take on how societies function, right? So Malinowski, he's all about those needs, right? Individual and societal, driving the creation of institutions. But Radcliffe Brown, how do you see the function of societies differently?
Well, if Malinowski was all about the individual gears, Radcliffe Brown, he was looking at the whole clock. He actually compared societies to, get this, the anatomy of an organism.
Well, societies as bodies. I'm going to need you to unpack that analogy for me.
Okay, so think of it like this. The human body, it's got all these different organs, right? Each one with its own job to do. Radcliffe Brown saw societies the same way. You've got your kinship systems, political structures, economic practices, all these different parts working together.
And they all work together, too.
To maintain the social order, keep the whole body of that society healthy and functioning.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. So, sticking with that body analogy, like the heart pumps blood to keep the body alive, Radcliffe Brown would say what? The economic system, it's distributing resources to keep society going.
Bingo. He was less interested in the why behind these practices and more concerned with the how. Like, what function do they serve in holding the society together, keeping it stable?
Okay, so both focused on function, but through different lenses. One's looking at the needs driving the parts, the other's looking at how those parts create the whole shebang. This is fascinating stuff, but really makes you wonder, what kind of lasting impact did this whole functionalist approach have? Like, did it change how we see the world?
That is the question, isn't it? And honestly, functionalism had a huge impact on anthropology. We got these crazy detailed ethnographies, these rich you-were-there accounts of life in different cultures, and it really pushed anthropologists to immerse themselves, to move from just theory to boots-on-the-ground field work.
Less talk, more action. Seems like a win for anthropology. But I know there were criticisms too, right? It wasn't all sunshine and roses.
Right, it wasn't perfect. One of the biggest critiques was, well, in all that focus on how societies maintain balance, they often missed, or maybe even ignored, things like conflict, power struggles, the historical context, all that.
So it's like they were so busy looking at the gears turning, they missed the, I don't know, the grease, the stuff that makes it all work or not work.
Yeah, exactly. And critics said that focus on stability, on order, especially during colonialism, could be a problem. Because if these societies are always seen as harmonious, balanced, well, it's easier to justify not shaking things up, even if there are injustices baked into the system.
It's like saying, oh, it's always been this way, so we shouldn't try to change it. That's a really important point. And it makes you think about how we view and explain things today. Like, are we looking at the whole picture? Are we missing those power dynamics, those historical contexts, just focusing on how things seem to be working on the surface?
You got it. And that's maybe one of the biggest takeaways from our functionalism deep dive. It's a reminder to think critically, question those assumptions. Whose perspective are we not hearing? What's missing from the story?
Seriously, such a good point. Well, this has been eye-opening, to say the least. We've gone back in time to 20th century England, explored the heart of functionalism, unpacked all its complexities, its strengths, its weaknesses. We even brought it back around to how it's still relevant today. And all through the lens of a Spanish academic text. Talk about a deep dive.
It just shows you knowledge knows no language barriers. And there's always more to learn, more to question, more to discover.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And hey, if this deep dive sparked any aha moments for you, we want to hear them. Share your thoughts online. Let's keep this conversation going. And until next time, happy exploring.